Hi guys, Miss Torelli here. Sorry I'm not in today. I will be back in tomorrow. Today we're going to be talking about speciation. And speciation is the last bit of information you're going to get before we just start reviewing for the test, which will be this Friday. So let's start out with the definition. Speciation just means the creation or formation of a new species. So how is it that all of these little adaptations can lead to an entirely new species? It seems incredible, but we've seen it happen. Speciation is just the verb form of the word species. So when you hear the word speciation, you can think of species to remember what it means. Take a look at this picture and see if you can identify the animal. What animal do you think this is? This is in fact a liger. And a liger is not a fictional animal, it's a real animal, and it's the animal that is produced when a lion and a tiger mate. So if you take this tiger here and you mate it with a lion, you're going to get a liger. You'll notice that the liger is quite a bit bigger than the tiger is. The tiger is a lot smaller than this liger here. Also, this tiger can do something that the liger cannot. And we're going to see that that's actually very important. So the requirements to be a new species are that you can mate with other members of the species and produce fertile offspring. So that's how you know that you have a species. If two different organisms cannot reproduce or cannot produce fertile offspring, then they are not members of the same species. So what does this mean, fertile offspring? Fertile offspring just means they can reproduce, so they can have babies, and their babies can have babies. Fertile means you can have babies. So again, you need to make sure that you can reproduce with other members of the species, and that the product of that reproduction can also reproduce. Ligers, as it turns out, are sterile. That means they cannot have babies. So are lions and tigers really different species? Yes, they are, because ligers can't have babies. So even though they can reproduce and make a baby, their baby can't have babies. The product of their reproduction cannot reproduce. So we know lions and tigers are actually different species. So what are the two things you need to be a species? What are those two requirements? You need to be able to produce offspring, and the offspring have to be fertile. The babies have to be able to have babies. So there's a couple different steps to speciation. There's isolation. There's actually two different ways that things can become isolated, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow. There's allopatric and sympatric. You don't have to worry about that for right now, but you do have to imagine what are some things that could possibly isolate members of a species. Well, there's a couple things. You could have a flood, for example. You could have the formation of a mountain. You could have the formation of an island. Or you could have some type of factor in that environment where species just stop interacting with each other very much. Maybe some hunt during the day and some hunt during the night, so they just don't see each other very often. However it is, the species, the one species, has to be broken up into two different groups. They have to become isolated from each other. Then, those two different groups have to have significantly different environmental factors that they can adapt to. So they need to adapt to their differences. Maybe one side of the mountain has different plants than the other side, or one side gets more vegetation than the other side, or maybe one side gets more rain, or has different herbivores living on it than the other side. Well, that's going to affect those species. They're going to have to adapt to those differences. So then you have that adaptation happen. And finally, you have differentiation. That means those adaptations have gotten so different that if the species were to be put back together again, they would no longer be able to mate. They would no longer be able to interact in a way that resulted in reproduction of fertile offspring. So those are our 3 steps. Again, you need to have isolation. You need to take the one species and split it into 2 groups somehow. They need to adapt to their different environments. And those adaptations have to be so extreme, so severe, that they are no longer able to mate with each other successfully. So those are our 3 steps. See if you can remember them. What are the 3 steps of speciation? First, we've got isolation. They have to be isolated from each other. They have to be split into 2 groups. They have to adapt to their different environments. And finally, they have to become significantly different. And that's all for today. We're going to be doing more on this tomorrow. So for the rest of class, look back over at the second video that I'm going to be posting for you. And the rest of the instructions should be on the board. Thanks, guys.